Well, I'm pleased to have a special guest today, a cowboy poet. I fell in love with cowboy poetry when I stumbled into a poetry reading contest or exhibition, I guess it was, down in Austin of cowboy poets. And it's very fascinating. So with me is Patrick Sullivan. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And of course, you have the
So I'm more of a cowboy poetry appreciator.
okay,
Um, and but I've studied it for about 3 decades now. So
wow,
it's pretty interesting and very wide and deep area.
yeah.
And most of the great ones, were or are cowboys.
Well, you have the classic background for this, which I assume is generates cowboy poetry love, is aeronautical engineering.
Right, right. Yes, yes. I'm an actual rocket scientist.
But yeah, quite an extensive background. I mean, you've worked in the Pentagon and a lot of classified
I,
stuff.
I, I was a Navy pilot for many years, which it was a choice of working for a living or going to fly airplanes where they gave you the gas for free, with the occasional downside that people like to shoot at you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, you got a little background in missile defense, I understand. Also,
Right,
yeah,
right. All those missiles that are flying right now,
yeah.
that are they're testing, and the ones flying over in the Middle
Ukraine.
East.
Yeah, in the
At
Middle
one
East.
time, they were all mine. They
No
were,
kidding.
yeah, yeah. The Patriot. When you hear about the Patriot, that was my bird, my missile
Wow, wow,
that I took from just the very idea all the way through to production.
wow.
So,
Boy, I'd love to talk to you about that at another time.
right.
Get into that. That's a fascinating area of how all that works. And I guess you got into the bunker busters
Well,
a
yeah,
little
it's
bit. The two missiles going in it. Yeah.
right, right.
Anyway,
I can
back.
tell you way more about that than you'd ever want to know.
Yeah, probably that you could tell me. Um, well, on your love for cowboy poetry, uh, tell me a little bit about how you got into it initially.
Well, when I grew up, my the earliest memory of my parents is them reading me poems, reading me poetry. I guess to put
Oh,
me to sleep. I don't know.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and then as a young, I don't know, a 7, 8 year old, uh, Tennyson and the Charge of the Light Brigade,
yeah.
and it sort of expanded from there. I've always loved horses. I've got a big black foundation quarter horse,
Oh,
um, and oh, about almost 40 years ago now, they started the first first modern cowboy poetry gathering there in Elko, Nevada. Um, and The guy who actually founded it will be in Alpine this coming weekend.
is this an event that happens every year at this time?
Yes, it's
Okay.
they've been having it there for almost for I believe a little bit more than 30 years.
Well, give me a little example of in our audience of cowboy poetry. You got one you could
Well,
recite.
I, yeah, I picked one from a book that's 1932. I picked this one. It's very representative of both
Yeah.
what cowboy poetry is and the history of it. And I'll talk about the history in a minute, but let me just read it.
Okay.
So this is for all those people out there, especially the ladies that love horses, called The Hooves of the Horses. The hooves of the horses, oh, witching and sweet is the music earth steals from the iron shod feet. No whisper of lover, no trilling of bird, can stir me as the hooves of the horses have stirred. They spurn disappointment and trample despair. They drown with their drum beats the challenge of care. With scarlet and silk for their banners above, they are swifter than fortune, sweeter than love. On the wings of the morning, they gather and fly. In the hush of the nighttime, I hear them go by. Horses of memory thundering through with flashing white fetlocks all wet with the dew. When you lay me to slumber, no spot can you choose, but will ring to the rhythm of galloping shoes. And under the daisies, no grave be so deep that the hooves of the horses shall sound in my sleep. Anyway,
Whoa.
it's by a man named Will Ogilvie.
Yeah.
Very interesting in that he was a Scotsman. That's written by a Scotsman
Hmm.
who traveled to Australia back at the turn of the last century
Yeah.
and was an Australian cowboy. Eventually ended up in the United States as a professor of journalism, but his books and his poems still ring at every cowboy poetry gathering. There's somebody reciting a poem by Will Ogilvie, and they're
Wow.
all about horses.
You know, I can hear that as you were reading it. I could envision being around a campfire and
Right,
old cowboy
right.
reciting that, you know? That's
So
very romantic picture.
if you think of it, if you think of and I think how long mankind, Homo sapiens, has been building campfires.
Yeah.
You know, many of us today, you know, do it on trail rides or in elk
Yeah.
camp or hunting, you know, when we're out hunting.
Yeah.
But if you go back, it's
Mm.
thousands of years, probably 6 or 7 thousand years. Um, and they had campfires. And
Yeah.
what do you do around a campfire, whether it's last weekend at elk camp or 8, 9 thousand years ago? They tell stories.
Yeah. Sing, tell
And
stories.
that's all a poem
Yeah.
is a story, but it's done generally to rhyme, so it's easy to remember.
Yeah. Well, even the biblical stories
So it's
originally were in a poetic singing,
exactly,
fashion.
exactly.
Yeah.
The Psalms were written in
Yeah.
as poems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And you could
and
remember
that
and pass them
was
on.
500 BC, I think, if I
Oh,
remember my Bible stories right.
yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so so it's so here you have a genre that came probably I'm still trying to research it.
Yeah.
Probably came down from Scotland and Ireland and England because it's most of the poems are in English and go with those rhyming schemes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
as you well know, as a follower of it, there's funny ones. You can break out laughing. You
yeah.
can break. I've been. I was at one. It was actually my very first cowboy poetry event in Elko, and this cowboy literally sat next to me, and he still had dust on his raincoat, uh, and his hands looked like you could the creases in his hands looked like an inch deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a guy I didn't know at the time, but who stood up and told a poem, and the guy at the end of the poem or halfway through the poem, the guy was crying.
Mm.
I said, you know, what in the world is this?
Yeah.
And at the end, I was crying too.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Anyway, but then there's funny ones,
Yeah.
but they're all stories of some
Yeah.
sort.
Well, like a song, they have a way of reaching your heart and touching it.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and uh, and the ones that make you laugh, well, it's good for your soul. You got to laugh.
Right.
World's too crazy not to have a sense
Right.
of humor.
Exactly.
So, God, I'm sure, has a sense of humor. He's got to.
Right.
So, well, you got another one you can share with us?
Well, I do. And this is another example. This one actually doesn't have a horse in it. It's by a man named Bruce Cascadden,
Yeah.
an old time cowboy. He died in 1947. He was born probably in about 1880. He cowboyed in around Colorado and Texas.
Yeah.
Eventually he was a mule skinner in World War I, went to France, was in combat with mules in France, came back, and a rancher noticed that he seemed to have a way with words, and he'd come up with these little poems, and he encouraged him to start writing them down.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the end, this is just one of his books,
Wow.
a poem,
Wow.
and they were the favorites of ranchers and farmers all over the West and Midwest
Yeah.
at the time. So this one's a little bit more thoughtful, and there's not a horse in it, and it's called "The Time to Decide." So it's pretty good advice.
Yeah.
You ever stand on the ledges, brink of a great plateau, and look from their jagged edges on the country that lay below? When your vision met no resistance, nothing to stop your gaze, till the mountain peaks in the distance stood wrapped in a purple haze. On the winding watercourses and the trails of the mountainsides, where you guided your patient horses and your long and lonesome rides. When you saw earth's open pages, and you seemed to understand as you gazed on the work of ages, rugged and tough, but grand. There, things you thought were strongest, and the things you thought were great, and for which you had striven longest, seemed to carry but little weight. While the things that were always nearer, and things you thought were small, seemed to stand out grander and clearer as you looked from the mountain wall. While you're gazing on such a vision and your outlook is clear and wide, if you have to make a decision, that's the time and place to decide. Although you return to the city and mingle again with the throng, though your heart may be softened by pity or bitter from strife and wrong, through others should laugh and in derision, and the voice of the past grow dim, yet stick with the cool decision you made on the mountain's rim. Anyway, pretty good advice. And there was a horse in there.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Get
Anyway,
it, of course.
Bruce Cascadden, and he's every cowboy and every reciter's favorite.
Wow.
Because his meter is so regular and his rhymes are so clear.
Yeah.
And the pictures, I mean, you've been there. I'm sure you've sat on up high on a hill or mountain and looked out, and so you can see I can see and just reading that, I can see the colors.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, is there a website that people can go to find out more about the Alpine Festival?
Yes. So the just Google Lone Star Cowboy Poetry Gathering.
Okay.
And when it comes up, it'll say 2023, that's last year, or 2024. So I recommend going with 2024.
Okay.
You can also, YouTube is pretty amazing nowadays. There's a lot of good poetry on YouTube, a lot of good cowboy poetry on YouTube.
Yeah. Do you have a website or?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but the Lone Star has a video.
Okay.
I think it's about an hour long that you can buy. That's really good. Another thing that is really good on the music is our Saturday show is going to be something called Roll On Cowboy.
Okay.
And it's put together by a young Texan, Andy Hedges from Lubbock, who just seems to have more and more talent every time I see him. And on that show, what Andy has done in the last couple of years is go around and interview poets and ranchers, and just make these podcasts, just listening to them, asking a few questions and listening to them. And as he did it, he came up with the idea of putting a show together from the musicians, and that's going to be the big Saturday night show. And you're talking to the master of ceremonies
All
of,
right.
of that show. So, and I'm going to avoid doing any poems because there's real cowboys up there on the stage. Some of my favorite people will be up there,
Yeah.
uh, and to show the diversity of it all. The youngest is, I think she's still 12. It might be, she might have come 13. That's Maggie Rose. That's Andy's daughter, plays the fiddle. And the oldest person on stage is the legendary, and we need a better word than legendary when we talk about him, the legendary Ramblin' Jack Elliott.
Mm.
And Ramblin' Jack is the guy that Bob Dylan modeled himself after in 1960, 1961.
Yeah.
And Jack is still going down the road.
Wow.
He and I go on tour every once in a while.
Oh, wow. Wow. How
If
incredible.
you can imagine,
Ramblin'
he likes
Jack.
riding
Yeah.
around in my big truck.
Wow. How cool. How cool.
So,
How cool. Ramblin' Jack. Yeah. And
Ramblin' Jack
Bob Dylan's
Elliott.
still going too.
Right, right. Jack's actually going better at 93. He's 93.
Wow. Wow. That's inspiring. That's inspiring. Anytime somebody's in that age range and they're still cranking.
Right. And he's in, he had a stroke some years ago, but he's sort of overcome that, and he's back playing, and I think he has a smaller guitar now. It's a little bit easier for him. But so those are the kind of people. Plus Rod Taylor, who used to be cow boss out of Philmont.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of Randy Riemann, the great horse trainer. Joel Nelson. I don't know if you've heard of Joel. Joel is a National Heritage Fellow, meaning that every year the council, the National Arts Council, designates 5 to 10 people as essentially national treasures, as in the folk arts.
Yeah.
Well, here you have an Alpine Texas cowboy who's considered a national treasure.
Yeah. Wow.
I think it's.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a really, really, really fun gathering. And
right.
For the radio audience, we'll post the website. But for the radio audience, would you give that website again?
Just Google Lone Star. That should be easy. Lone Star Cowboy Poetry Gathering 2024.
All right.
That's what I do. I don't remember the website, and I'm not smart enough to bookmark it, so I have to type it into Google every time.
Well, that should work. Everything's on Google. Thank you, Patrick Sullivan. I appreciate the time.
Well, it's been delightful. I sure do appreciate the chance to talk about Texas and cowboy poetry, and all the best to you all.
Well, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.